Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. It's been a couple weeks since I've been on, but I really hope you have been paying attention to Big Sky basketball, men's and women's. There is quite a bit to talk about. Welcome back again. I am your host, Casey. It is great to be here, whether you are watching me live or on replay. Like always, it means a lot. Each year I have a Big Sky basketball tournament show. And this year I decided to go big. So, with that, today I'd like to introduce to you for Montana or covering Montana, Lance Hartzler. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you, my friend?
I am well. Covering UNC, University of Northern Colorado, I would like to welcome for the first time on the show, Aaron Rath. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And one of the Weber State weekly guys covering Weber State, Colby Peterson. How are you, buddy?
Good, man. We kept the name pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, we definitely did.
But shout out to Brandon Garside, who used to work for the Standard Examiner. We got his blessing when taking over the name. We said, "Hey, man," because he used to do a great web series, and so we want to borrow that, and he said, "Okay, you can have it."
Good. I'm glad. Brian Marceau was supposed to be here as well as Kyler. They had some family issues that they had to take care of, so I hope all is well with them. But that's okay. We have all of you guys. We can definitely talk about men's and women's basketball with absolutely no problem, and we're going to try to cover all of the universities. Are we good to go?
Let's do it.
Oh,
all right. First up, Lance, let's talk a little bit about Idaho. Okay. Brian told me that overall they have 2 wins when they don't shoot over 50%, and they are the bottom 10 in the nation in defense, and they only win when they shoot a lot and then when they make it a track meet. So
yeah, that actually
what do you got?
Yeah, that kind of sums up Idaho. They have they play small, right? They're one of the smaller teams in the conference outside of big man Tanner Christensen, who's a solid 7 feet, 250. Like, he's a big dude, but he's young. And they're really good when they go out and run. Mikey Dixon's one of the better scorers in the conference. Rashad Smith is kind of a small ball power forward that can run and do whatever they want him to do in certain matchups. Yusuf Saleh went off on Montana for 19 points in that upset in Moscow. That was 82-76 over Montana. So they've shown when their offense is going, on the rare occasion, like Brian told you, they can actually snag some wins. They're not the Idaho we've seen the last couple of years where they're bad on all ends of the floor. This team's bad on defense. No ifs, ands, or buts about that. They're bad. But offensively, they can get going. Mikey Dixon's one of the best scorers in the league. They got some guards. Trevante Anderson has been a really great second option next to Mikey Dixon. He went off on Montana in the loss when Brandon Whitney held Mikey to 0 points and like 0 of 7 shooting. Trevante Anderson scored like 20. So if they can get a couple guys going, that's actually a good team offensively. Obviously, you can't get stops, so it becomes a track meet, like Brian said. But that's their recipe for winning games. They got to make things a track meet.
Anyone else have anything to add for Idaho?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, Lance is 100% correct. When the Wildcats took the trip up to Moscow, they had lost to Eastern Washington on Thursday night. And then I think that they overlooked Idaho a little bit because one of the things that the Wildcats have struggled with is the fact that they can't guard the 3. And in that game, like you said, Trevante Anderson and Mikey Dixon, they really did a great job. And they just absolutely banging threes. They did a good job of making sure that Tanner Christensen didn't get super involved in terms of like scoring in the front court. But man, those 2 guys in the back court, they can just rip the nets. And like Brian said, when they get going, it's tough. But the problem, like Lance said, is they can't get stops on the other end. So it becomes this track meet where they're giving up 80 points a game, right? Which is like that's eye popping, right? Like, wow, you got to score more than 80 to win a match. Like, it's pretty high. But on nights where they're shooting hot, they can keep up.
So going into the very first round of the men's Big Sky tournament, Idaho is number 9, and they are facing number 8 Sacramento State. How do we think that game is going to go?
What a contrasting style.
Yeah, really, completely two different teams. Sac State has really shown improvement this year. And I personally think that they're going to win that one.
I think they have the best player on the floor. I saw Bryce Fowler score 39 points last night in Missoula on Montana. I think if he does that, it's hard to beat Sac State, right? They play such a slow style. Travis DeCure said it to media last night after the game. They play.
I think we lost Lance. That's all right.
Yep.
Okay.
The bummer part for Idaho too is you look at that first round and playing Sacramento State. Even if they get their game going and they take care of Sacramento State, man, they landed themselves in a tough spot in that bracket. And then they got to play the number 1 seed. I mean, that's a tough game for them. But you know, both those teams just got to be careful. And you know, you hear this talked about a lot is don't look past the game you're in, trying to prepare for the game you have next and in front of you. And I think both of these teams could get complacent. And, you know, I think that could have a factor on this game is preparing for Montana State rather than preparing for their current opponent.
Right. Definitely. All right. Let's see here. Aaron.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about Northern Colorado. First off, this is your first time on the show, so welcome again. So many of my viewers may not know who you are. So how are you associated with UNC?
So I am the voice of the women's basketball team on ESPN Plus, and they probably have heard me say "knocks it down" for the Bears more times than they want. But yeah, that's my thing. And then I also am the color analyst for football for the Bears as well.
Okay. And how long have you been with them?
7 football seasons and 6 basketball seasons.
Okay, awesome.
Yep.
So you definitely know your stuff when it comes to UNC. So I am very happy to have you on here.
I appreciate that, and I'm excited to be here.
All right. So UNC comes in to the tournament number 3, and they are scheduled to face the winner of Eastern Washington and Northern Arizona. So overall, how is your view of UNC men's for the regular season?
Well, from where I sit and from what I've seen is, you know, obviously Dalen Kuntz is Dalen Kuntz. You're not going to find a better scorer in the league. To me, this team comes down to how a couple other people play. I kind of look at it, and I'm not comparing. Before I say this statement, I'm not comparing Dalen Kuntz to Michael Jordan, but I'm calling it the Michael Jordan effect. Michael Jordan was going to get his points, right? It was if you could stop Scottie Pippen and everybody else, you were going to beat the Bulls. To me, Dalen Kuntz is going to get his points. If you can get Bodie Hume off of his game and Kurt Jokic or John Kuch and Drew Kuxhausen, you know, if you can get those guys off of their game, they're a beatable team. They're very streaky. Bodie Hume can come in one game and throw up 30. And then the next game, throw up 3. So to me, it comes down to not Dalen Kuntz, but the supporting cast behind Dalen Kuntz. If those guys get going, I think this is a very unstoppable team. I mean, it took a last-second shot at Montana State the other night for the Bears to fall. And realistically, I'm actually, as a Bears fan, I'm actually kind of glad they lost. Because putting them in the 3, and a lot of people are going to go, whoa, but putting them in the 3 spot versus the 2 spot puts them up against teams in the second round that they've won 3 of 4 against. And in the 2 spot, they would be playing teams that they've won 1 of 4 against. So they're actually better spotted and seated in the 3 spot. And we'll see how things play out. It's the tournament. Everybody starts 0-0, and it's a new tournament.
Who would you rather play against, Eastern Washington or Northern Arizona?
Northern Arizona.
I hear you. Anyone else want to talk about UNC?
So I totally agree with what Aaron has put out here, right? That like Northern Colorado is a team that, Dalen Kuntz is going to get his, but I think that's the secret sauce for them to really kind of have the effectiveness is to make sure that the other role players contribute. If Drew Cuxhausen is out there, that the man's a sharpshooter, right? He's shooting 43% this season. If he's able to get going along with Bodie Hume, like you said, Aaron, if he's able to, at least contribute and get into double digits, they're going to be a really tough team to beat, But if they can slow down Dalen Kuntz and, because he's going to get double digits, he's going to get it, right? Like he's the scoring champ in the conference this season. And if they can keep, Drew Cuxhausen to maybe 2 threes instead of 4 threes, then you're going to have a chance against this Northern Colorado team.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, those role players, those side guys, those are the ones that are going to make the difference. And I think that's the truth for any team, but Northern Colorado's got some really dangerous scorers that if they come out, like you said, if Drew Cuxhausen comes out and hits 2 3-pointers in a row, it could be a long night.
Let him get going. Yeah, he's going to cook you.
Yep.
All right. Oh, Lance, what's going on, Lance?
One last one. I think jumping on what you guys said, I think Northern Colorado is equally the most dangerous, but the most volatile team in the league. They can either whoop you by 20 or they could lose by 20 because they just aren't hitting threes, or Bodie Hume isn't getting free because we know Dalen will get his. But we don't know if Bodie Hume, who should be an all-conference first teamer, is going to show up, or if the Bodie Hume who's not on any all-conference team will show up. It's really hinging a lot on Bodie Hume because he's a fourth-year guy who just hasn't popped the way I think a lot of people thought he would pop.
Yeah, totally agree.
Same. Totally fair, right? Like a guy who, I feel like in a lot of ways, Bodie Hume is the like prototypical new Big Sky big. He's that guy who can stretch the floor and he can do but like you said, Lance, he's a little inconsistent, and that inconsistency has been kind of the Achilles heel of this Northern Colorado team because they're sitting in the 3 seed right now. But man, they could have been the 2, like they had the Wildcats on the ropes and Greeley had them like in that first half, whooped them. Yep. But then they went cold in the second half, weren't hitting threes, and then they got whooped.
And
it took a Raekwon Battle half-court shot to beat them in Bozeman. Like, Bodie Hume had the game winner, then Raekwon does that.
Yep.
Yeah,
and that was a heartbreaker.
For sure.
And the one person that we didn't mention there, when you start talking about those scorers, is Matt Johnson II. He comes in too. And he's a shooter too. He shoots 42% behind the arc, right behind Cuxhausen, averaging 14 points a game. I mean, he's just dangerous.
I hear you guys. I hear you. All right, Mr. Colby. Let's talk a little bit about Weber State. So, first off, I just want to say, out of all the stadiums in the Big Sky, Weber has to be my favorite.
The Purple Palace, man.
I just love how I don't know. It's the whole circular thing, and NAU has their whole circular stuff going on. NAU needs to make a basketball arena. And if they did something like yours, I think that'll be kind of nice.
No.
However,
the thing to do right now is to do what Idaho did. That's what you got to do.
I was going to say,
smaller gym where you can pack.
Idaho is nice too. Yeah. Idaho is really nice looking. I will do. I will say that they just need to win. Okay, so how is Weber doing? They are going into the men's Big Sky tournament as the number 4 seed, and is facing number 5 Grizz Montana. So, is that kind of scary for you?
Oh, for sure, right? Like we were talking about this on Twitter last night after the Wildcats lose to Southern Utah at home. Hate to lose to the Birds, but it happens. And so it's like, what does that mean for seeding? It means that you will face in the second round the Montana Grizzlies. And so Brett Hine, who is the beat writer, he's our beat writer at the Standard Examiner. I'm sure you folks have talked to him before. We're talking about this on Twitter. Brett Hine noted that the Wildcats have faced Montana in what will be 9 of the last 13 conference tournaments, right? You know, counting this next week. In those 8 games that they've played, they are 1 of 7. The only time that they beat the Grizz was in 2016 in the championship game, and that was a close game, right? Like they didn't blow them out. Like they ended up winning that game close at the end. And so, if you're a Wildcat fan like me, you're not feeling good about Wednesday, and kind of what that brings for you because, yeah, man, like playing the Grizz. I mean, the thing about Travis DeCure is he always gets his team up to play in those big games, right? He does a great job of that. And Weber State is definitely one of those games for him. And so in the last, I was at the 2019 game, right? And he knows just how to get Ray's system. And so what you'll see is in that year, in 2019, he knew that if you stop Jarek Harding and Cody John, that the game is yours. The Wildcats ended up, they were down by 40 at one point in the conference tournament and in the semis that year. Last year, Wildcats coming in as the higher seed, taking on, Montana, who was the lower seed. Nope, it wasn't happening for them. Once again, DeCure outcoaches Ray and is able to, even though I would say that the Wildcats are probably the more talented team, they just haven't been able to put it together. And the month of February has shown that, right? The second time through the conference, the Wildcats have really struggled to play, especially the top teams, right? Some of the teams, they're losing by double digits and, that's a function of trying to foul at the end. But I mean, there are losses that shouldn't have been, right? Like the Idaho loss in Moscow. Now, Idaho had this weird stretch there where who they beat, guys? They beat Eastern, they beat us, and they beat Montana. Is that right? Yeah. So and I think that's the most interesting thing about this year is that if you're going to Boise, you're going to get a show because anything could happen. Any team could show up. Idaho State could beat Montana by 20, apparently, right? But then you could have, I don't know, anything could happen. But for the Wildcats right now, facing Montana in, the second round in the quarters is not obviously the seed that Wildcat fans would want based on the track record and the way that these two styles line up.
Well, I will say that if a 5 conference win team can go into Montana and beat Montana, I am sure that a Weber State team can beat Montana in the tournament.
See, but I don't know because I think that DeCure does this thing where he very much focuses on those big games, right? Like he's ready for Weber State. Every time that we've seen him, he's been ready. Now, the Wildcats did win, in a close one in January in Ogden against the Grizz, but they beat the Wildcats in Dahlberg. That's what happens. I think Ray has only won at Dahlberg 4 times in his career, right?
Right.
It just doesn't happen, right? And so DeCure is ready, but then I think he has this problem where sometimes he looks past some of those other teams because maybe just not as excited. And so, yes, Northern Arizona does get the win, right? But DeCure will make sure that he has his team ready to face the Wildcats.
But you did knock the hammer on the head when you said in the tournament, it's 0-0. Teams show up and play who maybe haven't all year long. Case in point. And I was gonna bring this up when I was gonna talk about NAU, but last year NAU went to the second round and played Eastern Washington and only lost by 4 or 5 points. And Eastern Washington win and win the whole thing. So you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know.
Certainly.
But I definitely wish you luck.
But there's a track record. That's all I'll say. There's a track record. I mean, Lance, you could speak more of this. I mean, you've seen every Grizz game this season. You've seen it, man. I mean, you've seen how these two teams have played each other, and you're, intimate with, with some of these dudes. I mean, talk to us a little bit about Travis DeCure and kind of his mentality going into these big games.
Yeah. I mean, I think Weber State getting matched up with Montana just makes for the most exciting quarterfinal game. Just absolutely, you got the two best coaches, the two most historically dominant programs meeting in the quarterfinals. In the like the 4-5 game should always set up this type of game, right? This year though, it's inconsistent. I don't know what Montana team is going to show up. We've seen this Montana team beat Weber State at the buzzer. They honestly, I think they should have beat them in Ogden. They had that game, but a late run, mostly by Dylan Jones, really sealed that game in Ogden. I think Montana had the makings of a win, and they really could have and easily should have swept Weber. But at the same time, Montana goes and loses to Idaho. They go and lose to Idaho State. They lose to NAU in Dahlberg, which, God, that happened last year, but I don't really count the pandemic season. That doesn't happen in normal college basketball seasons. They don't lose to NAU in Dahlberg Arena. But that's just the type of team this Montana roster is. I think it's less secure, more of their youth, and they're still learning how to get up for games. They play up to teams, but they play down. That's why they lose to Sac State. That's why they lose to NAU. That's why they play not really all that great against those really bottom tier teams. I think they've lost to all four of the bottom teams: Sac, Idaho State, NAU, and Idaho. They've lost a game to each of those teams. But then you turn around and say they've beaten all the top teams except for Northern Colorado, which, again, they probably should have won in Greeley when they lost by 1 point. They've shown the ability to play with but also lose to anybody. But you get into the conference tournament, history has the Bobcats, the Grizzlies, as kind of the leaders on Weber, but this is a different Grizz team. I don't know if they can necessarily do it. I think this Weber State team is the most talented team in the league. I think they have the single most amount of talent, in my opinion, when healthy. It's just a matter of, can they figure it out? The schemes have been funky. I think Brett Hyde noted it. They've just been in a funk during February, and Montana has too. They played awful in February compared. I think they were 8-2 at the beginning of February, and now they're 18-13 overall. They tanked in the month of February.
So, Lance, what does Montana, since this is a great time just to talk about Montana, what do they need to do to get rid of that funk?
I'm sure Travis DeCure would love to find an answer to that question. We've been asking for a month. I think they just need to find something that works offensively. I think Josh Bannon, when he's rolling, when Robbie Beasley, one of their guards, when he's hitting threes, when Linnell Martin is catching and firing, and they're getting in pace, running in transition, not playing slow, they're hard to beat. But the trick to that is, for that to work, their defense has to work. Their offense, more than I think any other team, is predicated on how good their defense plays. And that defense has struggled ever since starting center Mac Anderson got hurt against NAU. That was early February. He went down on an awkward landing against Carson Tout. He hasn't played since. I don't think he's going to play in the Big Sky tournament. Travis DeCure said he does not know about his status as of last night. That doesn't bode well. You could probably count on Mac Anderson not playing. And they've struggled without him. He's their best defensive player. He's their most mobile athlete at 6'10", probably their fastest player, and he allows them to play fast. Because of that, with him absent, their offense is sputtered because they just can't get in transition, can't get those easy buckets, can't get Cam Parker free, can't get Robbie Beasley free. Because a lot of those guys, most of their makes don't come in the half court. They get transition threes. They get quick steal coast-to-coast layups. Really simple stuff, because in the half court, their offense can struggle and get into a funk because they don't have that one dude. Like, let's point out Weber State. They got Kobe McEwen. You can throw him the ball, go get a shot, go create something. The closest Montana has to that is probably Josh Bannon, but he's still young. He's a sophomore. You can't expect that every single time you need a bucket. And that's what this team's Achilles heel has kind of been all season.
Yeah, it's a good point, Lance, because like you said, Montana profiles as a very stiff defensive team, right? Like they're always going to play you really, really great defense. The problem is the offense, right? They've had some struggles trying to find that offense. And like you said, Josh Bannon has been really, really great for him. He was great in the tournament last year against the Wildcats. He's got a really funky like release on his shot. He's got this like weird hitch. But like you said, when he's hitting, like he's really, really tough. And plus he's got a little bit of size for the league. You know, he can really do some things both inside and outside for you. But the loss of Mac Anderson, it kind of takes away a lot of that front court, and especially that defensive profile where so much of the defense goes through what they want to do. Yeah, it makes it tough because offensively is where the Grizz struggle.
But let's talk a little bit about the environment, right? I mean, you're going to You're going to have a 4 versus 5 game. Montana, we all know they travel well. And if you've ever been in that Boise arena,
I have.
It gets Montana loud in there, right?
Yep.
And the way they see it, they're playing to play Montana State in the semifinals,
Which is an interesting matchup.
which is a very interesting matchup. But I think the environment is going to have just as much of an effect on that 4-5 game as the players on the court. I mean, it gets pretty rowed and ruckus in there, especially in that arena. If you've ever been in there, it's nice and cozy and it gets loud.
One of the stadiums that I'm still wanting to go to one of these years. Hey, okay, let's talk a little bit about Lance. Let's keep on with you for a second. We just got done talking about Montana. How's Montana State doing?
They're the best team in the league right now. I mean, I did not expect them to roll the way they did after losing to UM last Sunday in Dahlberg. I thought they'd kind of coast once they beat Southern Utah, sealed up the Big Sky title. I, from my perspective, thought, they're just going to coast, chill into the finals or chill into the conference tournament, not really try to beat Sac State, not that wild finish against Northern Colorado, but they decided they want to put an exclamation point on what has been arguably, I think, in some circles, the greatest Montana State men's basketball season in history. It's arguable. There's probably some teams that Brick Breeden had, but this team seems special. And I will admit, I did not expect this. I thought this team had shades of last year where they weren't consistent. I didn't trust Xavier Bishop, didn't trust Amin Adamu or Abdul Muhammad. I don't like Jabril Bello's game. I don't like slow bigs. That's my personal biases. But they've been dominant. They've been really good. They've had a couple really close calls that they've learned to just win through. Whereas Montana, they lose those close games a lot of times. Montana State, they don't lose those close games. They gutted out a couple games that they probably easily should have lost, but they won. That was part of their massive, I think, 10, 12-game win streak, something like that in the middle of the season. They're just rolling. Everyone knows what they are. You know what they have because they're the same team as last year. There's not much different other than the addition of Raekwon Battle, who transferred from Washington, who is a spark plug. Dude is electric. He hit the game winner against Northern Colorado. He dunks on anyone. He's not afraid. He's good for a highlight dunk a game. He kind of makes them a little different. He gives them that spark that you're missing, that answer to John Knight, that answer to Kobe McEwen, that dude who can just light up an arena.
It's going to be interesting. I mean, for round 2, it doesn't seem there's much of a competition for them. They're either going to get Idaho or they're going to get Sac State. Either way, they're moving on to round 3. What will be interesting to see in round 3 is if the Grizz do win, it's going to be a Cat versus Grizz round 3 showdown.
Yep.
Well, and like Lance said, the Grizz are a team that like to play up, and so I think that they have the advantage against the Wildcats. Should they beat the Wildcats? We saw what happened in Dahlberg. What was it, Lance? Like a week ago? Was that what it was?
Last Sunday.
Yeah, it was last Sunday. Yeah, and like the Cats were not in that game. Like they, the Grizz came out and just like took care of it, and so there's this really weird dynamic where this is actually probably the perfect path for the Grizz to get back to the championship game for the first time since 2018. But anyway, I can't remember if they played in 19, but like the thing is, actually they did because they beat the Wildcats in the semis. So the thing is that like this is the perfect path for them because they play, they have the advantage over Weber State. We saw what happened in Dahlberg a week ago, that they can beat this team, this Bobcats team, as talented and as good as they are right now. And so we might see, potentially a Grizz Northern Colorado or a Grizz SUU final this year, which I don't think anybody would have said that's the final match at the beginning of the season, right?
Yeah, and I actually agree with you. I think if you're Montana State, you don't want to play Montana. You would rather play Weber State because I think the emotions and the added pressure being the higher seed, the dominant year Montana State has had, I don't think you want that. Obviously, they'll say otherwise. They seem like a very confident, borderline cocky group. Danny Sprinkle's energy has really infected that team. So they probably would say they want Montana. They would embrace that challenge. That's the vibe they give off. Man, I don't know about that because that's a lot of pressure playing and having the overhead cloud of what if we lose to this team and we get upset by what has really been a disappointing Montana team.
Yeah, I mean, because if you watched the game against Montana State and Weber State in Ogden, Raekwon Battle comes into the game and like you said, Lance, an absolute spark plug, just starts knocking down threes. Plus Xavier Bishop was cooking. Jabril Bello gets Dante Bassett in foul trouble, so he's out of the game. And like they were off to the races. Like it wasn't a contest after that at that point. Like they're up 20 and they just, the Wildcats couldn't do anything, and that broke their win streak, and thus began, the beginning of woes for the Wildcats leading into February.
Yeah, and I think Montana State kind of has not the perfect counter, but they have a really strong counter to Weber State. I mean, Bello against Bassett, that's a winning matchup. Bishop, yeah, McEwen's 6'5", a little bit bigger, but Bishop can hold his own against any of Weber State's guards. Adamu Muhammad can guard. Yeah, and all who's the matchup for Weber State with Raekwon Battle? They don't have that type of athlete. Dylan Jones is awesome, but he's kind of more like your Draymond Green, undersized, thick power forward who's 6'4". He's not a matchup that he almost can get taken out of that game.
Yeah, you don't want him. Yeah, you don't want to match him up with an athlete like Raekwon Battle who can beat him off the dribble, but also you have to stretch the floor because Dylan Jones wants to live around, he's the best he's the best rebounder in the conference, right? There's a reason because he hangs out in certain areas of the floor, right? You don't want him pulled out to the perimeter. And that's been the Achilles heel of this Wildcat team, right? Is that they give up a lot of threes, even to the worst 3-point shooting team in the conference, right? They just seem to let that happen. And that's what happened against Montana State was that Xavier Bishop's hitting, Raekwon Battle comes in and starts knocking them down. I mean, it's really weird, but like, normally Randy Ray's teams don't have that problem. This one does.
Yep.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about Northern Arizona. So Northern Arizona is a 5-win conference, 9-win total season. The 2 wins at home for the conference is Sacramento State and Idaho. I will say they have been better on the road than at home for some weird reason. I don't know why. NAU has been adamant on letting Nick Maines and Cone run the show for offense. And they've been decent overall for defense. They really make teams, have to try and score, and kind of like Idaho, they make it a running game. You just have to run around them. The problem in my eyes about having Nick Maines and Jalen Cone be the 2 guys that are running the offense is you have 2 guys running the offense. Of course there's other people scoring, but not as much as those 2. You can't rely on 2 people, let alone 1, to win you a game. Granted, they are great players. They are amazing people, but you have to include the team. Granted, it is a young team. Now, going into tournament play, they are the 11th ranked team, which is the last. They're going up against Eastern Washington. I said this a little bit ago. Last year, NAU played Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington was the team that won the tournament, but NAU almost won that game by like 4 or 5 points. So it is a new season. Everyone starts 0-0. You don't know who's going to show up. And like I said, NAU has been better on the road than at home. So you really have no idea who it is. NAU went into Montana and beat Montana. Lance said earlier while I was talking to them that it was a very physical game. Maybe not the best played game in your words. Is that right, Lance?
Yeah, I thought it was kind of chippy. I thought I've been very critical of Big Sky refs this year. I think that was one of the more poorly officiated games I've seen.
Okay. Still, they went into Montana and won. Not many teams can say that they go there and win, except maybe the Cats and maybe UNC every now and then.
I don't think Montana State's won here in over 10 years.
Oh well, then never mind.
Auburg's tough.
Yeah.
Auburg is tough, man.
Yeah.
So with
teams have beat Montana in Dalton. Go ahead.
Who? NAU.
Sorry, you were talking, Casey. I interrupted you.
No. It's okay. Who are the three teams? NAU.
I think it was NAU, Sac State, and there was a third that I'm just blanking on this year.
Okay, got it. So, with that said, who wants to talk about NAU?
I'm always
Lance,
down to talking to you.
Yeah, I was like, Lance, you know them super well, having covered them. But what I was going to say was this, and then I'll give Lance, his opportunity to really kind of break it down. NAU, we see the loss of Cam Shelton and Evdolovich, right? Like that hurts. But they've added, the rise of Nick Maines, plus, like you said, we've seen Jalen Cone, and it's like this is good. But the problem with NAU is that they're a little thin in that, like, there isn't anybody else contributing. We talked a little bit about that with Northern Colorado, where it's like if they can get those other folks involved, we know that those folks are good. Jalen Cone is right up there. I mean, what was I looking at? Like right now, as it sits, Jalen Cone is the number 2 scorer in the conference, averaging 19.3 points. Like, we know he can get it done. The problem is that nobody else is getting it done for them. And so it feels like they're maybe a little bit in the same boat as Northern Colorado, but I feel like they're less deep. Northern Colorado has the guys that could do it, but sometimes they don't. NAU just doesn't seem to have those guys at all, and that's been the problem that they've had all year.
Yep. Nah, you hit the nail on the head. I think it's a very similar issue this NAU team, this program has had the past 5 years. I mean, as Casey said, I covered them when I was at the Daily Sun, and also I went to NAU, so I covered them in college. Like, it's kind of the same story. They have one dude you could probably rely on. That's Jalen Cone. This year, transfer out of Virginia Tech, highly touted player when he came in. He's lived up to expectations. He is a dynamite scorer. He makes contested three-pointers coming off the pick and roll. He knows how to get his shot. But you take that away, you beat NAU. Montana in Flagstaff held him to 12 shots, and that's incredible. You don't hold a guy who should be shooting 18 shots for his team, who is the literal engine of their offense, to 12 shots, because their offense is predicated on him getting his. And Casey, you mentioned they like to play fast. They might like to, but on KenPom and their advanced stats, they are actually 10th in the Big Sky in pace. They play one of the slowest paces in the Big Sky Conference. I think they may want to play fast, but because they don't have enough guys and guards to really run, and their defense, it's kind of bad. They struggle to get out and running. They struggle to play with tempo. Like, when they're good, when they're winning, they are playing quick. They're getting out on the break. But a lot of times they just get stuck in the half court because they can't get a stop. You can't get a stop, you can't run.
No.
And offensively, I'm looking at their stats. I don't know if you guys are ever on KenPom. If you see a lot of red, that's really bad. There's a lot of dark red on NAU stats.
Yeah.
They are 11th in effective field goal percentage on offense, which is basically they shoot the worst percentage on offense. So really, they have one of the worst offenses because they don't have anyone besides Jalen Cone. He really takes probably 50% of their offense. They just don't have another dude. Keith Heyman is streaky. Isaiah Lewis hasn't developed into an offensive playmaker. Nick Maines is great, but he can't get his shot. He has to be set up by a guy like Jalen Cone. And they don't have another guard who can just give Jalen Cone a breather.
Right. So does NAU beat Eastern Washington and move on to the second round?
Nah. I think this Eastern Washington team, they're weird. They're a bunch of 6'7" dudes, but I think that team is actually pretty scary.
Yeah, they're super scary because like they're what are they, the 9 seed? But it's like
7 seed.
7
Yeah.
seed, but it's just like, dude, that's not for real. Like they are a team that, if we saw the team that we saw in February back in December, this team is top 4 in the conference. Like they have, of course, they're a young team and they're still figuring it out, but that is, a team that you do not want to play. Like they are going to be a top 4 team in the conference next season. Like it's a lot of young guys. They can shoot the ball. They share the ball really well. They're well coached. Like it's not a matchup you want at all.
Yeah. And I'm sorry,
They're rolling.
they're actually 6 seed.
Yeah, 6. I was just
My bad.
thinking, man,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Like,
guys, I didn't have
they're
the
rolling
bracket in
They
front of me.
were, they were 11-12 right after that Southern Utah loss on February 5th. Since then, they are 17-14. That's 2 losses and 7-2 since starting the conference play 11-12. They are rolling. They figured something out in that stretch, and it's not like they beat nobody. They beat Weber. They beat Montana State. They beat NoCo. They've been good.
Yep. Super dangerous team. And that's going to continue into next season. Like I said, like I fully expect them to contend for a conference championship next year.
The only guy they might be losing is Rylan Bergerson and Angelo Allegri unless they're able to come back. They're seniors, so unless they can somehow snag an extra COVID year like Mac Anderson from Montana is doing, they bring back most of their roster. I mean, Steele Venters, who's perpetually a freshman, it feels like is back again.
Yeah, and he's a sharpshooter, right? Like he's right up there with Drew Cuxhausen as the best 3-point shooters in the conference. But like
4% from 3.
like but losing Bergerson, I think could hurt them because like he's a big part of their offense. Like he's the guy that runs the show, and so
He's
I don't know.
6'6" point guard.
Yeah, like he's massive, but like he does a lot for them, and so losing him could be big. But I think that I don't know. This team feels like somebody's going to step up. Like I fully expect somebody to step up, or they find somebody. Right? It's a guard-driven league, and like we've seen at Weber State, you can go find good guys in the portal who will come and play for you. And if Ewu did that, oh my god! Like if Ewu got a Kobe McEwen type, yeah, conference.
I mean, that's what Rylan was.
Yeah.
Bergerson transferred from Central Arkansas. He started his career at BYU. He ends up eventually at EW. So if they can just get another guy like they did with him this last offseason, like a McEwen, like a Jalen Cone, holy crap, that's a dangerous team next season.
Very.
Never. So the last 3 teams for the men that we have not talked about is number 10, Idaho State, number 8, Sac State, and number 7, Portland State. What are your thoughts on these 3 teams? Do they go anywhere? Are they out by the first round? What's going on now? Southern Utah isn't playing until the second round, but speaking of Southern Utah, this is their last tournament for Big Sky, and then they go to the WAC. Are we gonna miss them?
So I will say that we miss him in Ogden, but Aaron, I feel like you haven't had a lot to say, man. Like you miss him?
No, I'm not going to miss the traveling over there. I'm not going to miss him. I think, unfortunately for Southern Utah, I think they may get a second round win, but I think Northern Colorado is going to look to send them packing in the semifinals. And Southern Utah is a good team, though. I mean, Portland State, Idaho State, they got a tough draw there. I think either one of those teams is going to go in, and Southern Utah is just they've always been good. They're a good. If they could build a football program like they do a basketball program, they'd be a decent school. But they just don't. I mean, they're a good basketball team, though. I think either way, Portland State, Idaho State's going to get one game, and then Southern Utah moves on. But I'm excited to see Northern Colorado send them off to the WAC with an L.
Yeah, I think for them the big thing. So Tivian Jones did not play last night, right? That's big. If he plays in the conference, and I think that he will, in the conference tournament, like that's going to be really, really tough. But if he doesn't, I would definitely give Northern Colorado the edge. John Knight III is great. But Aaron, Casey, back to your question, man, like, of those 3 teams, I feel weird saying this, but like I feel like Idaho State has had something in the last month that like for some reason they've been able to like get cooking. And part of that's, we knew that, Tariq Cool was good, but Malik Porter has really come on. And then there's another guy they have who kind of like is that typical Big Sky big who can shoot, but he's also can play inside. I forgot his name.
Liam Sorensen.
No, I was thinking. I think it's the Rodriguez kid.
Jared Rodriguez. Yeah.
Yeah. Like in the game where they played back-to-backs against Weber State, plus in that game against Montana after the Grizz had lost to Weber State on Thursday night. And Idaho State just smashed Montana. Like that was a weird game because it was like, what is happening in Pocatello right now? There's like weirdness with their program where it's like they could win. They've had some wins. They've had some really weird wins lately. And so it's like them or Portland State. I guess I would give the Bengals the edge. But against SUU, I don't know. I mean, Todd Simon is a really good coach in Cedar City. And I hate saying that because I hate the Birds, guys. Like, I hate the Birds just as much as the next guy. And so you asked, like, are we going to be sad to see him leave? Yeah, a little bit, because like I like to beat the Birds. Like, this is as much as, when SUU said they were leaving the conference, that they didn't see Weber as a rival, or Weber didn't see them as a rival. I would say that's not necessarily true in Ogden. Like, we relish beating the Birds. Like, I want to see the Birds and I want to beat them every single time. Right. But I think it probably boils down to coaching. And I think I'd give Todd Simon the edge over it's Looney, right? Ryan Looney is the guy in Pocatello. Yeah. And so that's kind of where I'm at.
All right.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of with you. Like Southern Utah, I'm excited for a 10-team Big Sky. It's been coming ever since North Dakota left. This 11 odd number, it's so bad. I think the travel implications with the 10-team, there's no more odd man out with the schedule. It's going to make the Big Sky Conference tournament bracket potentially better. I really like the implications of having a 10-team league.
So, Lance, is that you're saying that Big Sky won't be filling those holes?
I wouldn't expect it anytime soon. Unless they can get someone from the D2 ranks, you're not bringing anyone from the WAC or the WCC. There's really no one available to bring in. And according to Brett Hine, the Standard Examiner, he talked to Dan Satter, one of the Big Sky associate commissioners. He mentioned the changes coming, and they're talking about revamping the conference tournament because of they're expecting 10 teams. So all writing on the walls, there's no going to be additions, which does make sense. There's no one to add.
Right.
Yeah, I had a chance to talk to Tom Wischersill during the football season, and off air I asked him that question, and I don't think they're adding another team. I think 10's a nice number for the conference. I think it's a good place to be.
If they dip below 10, they'd be forced to, but 10's a good, perfect number. I think people actually prefer it from travel implications or according to coaches I've talked to.
We just need more of you guys to play softball, dude. That's what I want to see. Like,
I agree. I agree.
What softball team?
Yeah. Well, why don't you play in the Big Sky, dude? Come on over.
I don't know. I don't control that.
like I've told Lance, NAU needs a softball team. However, someone said there's not enough room or space on or near NAU's campus.
Can you imagine the Coors effect at NAU? That'd be insane, dude.
Not only that, but softball in Northern Arizona, they've got like a 1-week season. They'd have to have an indoor. They'd have to have a dome to play softball.
Hey, so
that's what they used to do.
I saw a video of oh god, okay. One of the other FCS dome schools, but they play softball on the football field in the dome.
Yeah, that's what NAU used to do back in the day. They had a baseball and softball team, like sanctioned by the NCAA. I think they played in the Sky Dome.
Wow.
But then around an athletic director change in the 80s or 90s, he cut basically a ton of sports, and that brought them down to the current sports they're at. Some NAU history for y'all.
Interesting.
Tell them, throw your weight around, Casey. Tell them to bring it back, dude. We need more softball teams. We got like 6.
Yeah, I'll get right on that. All right. So since we've covered all the men's teams, who is winning the tournament?
I think the championship is Montana State, Northern Colorado, and I think it's anybody's game. I think it could very well come down to a last-second shot and who's going to get that victory there. And if that's the case, I'm going to be super sad that I didn't make the Boise trip this year.
Yeah, I'd say the same. Like it's probably a Montana State, Northern Colorado matchup. It could be a Montana State SUU, but I don't know. I'm a little bit wishy-washy on that side of the bracket, but I definitely feel that Montana State is probably the one coming off of the top of the bracket, and I would definitely give them the edge to win. And good for them. If they win, it'll be the first time they go dancing in 26 years. So, more power to. I mean, and also that means likely that Danny Sprinkle is not going to be around the conference for very much longer, because you have that kind of success, you probably start looking for a new job to go up soon.
Right, definitely. All right, gentlemen, let's talk real quick about the women's tournament. Number 11, Portland State. Number 10, Weber State. Number 9, Eastern Washington. 8, Northern Colorado. 7, Sac State. 6, Idaho. 5, Montana. 4, NAU. 3, Southern Utah. 2, Montana State. 1, Idaho State. And I forgot how that song ends. But hey, it seems kind of like on the women's side, all the men's teams that were doing good is doing bad on the women's side, and all the men's teams that were doing bad is doing good on the women's side. Kind of, except for like Montana State. They're number 2. Anyway, it looks interesting. This is, I think, Lance, you can vouch, this is probably the lowest seeded NAU team in a while for women's. They weren't even seeded this low last year. Let me bring that up. There we go. NAU goes against Montana, number 5 in the second round. So that's going to be interesting to see. I think NAU can do that one. Lance, do you have anything to say? No.
Yeah, I think it's a fun matchup. I mean, I think if they split the season series, and that NAU game in Flagstaff came down to wild Kyrika Rashid alley-oop and one at the buzzer. It very easily could have gone Montana's way. Some people argued it shouldn't have been a foul call. It shouldn't have been. That's here nor there at this point. But I think Montana's had some funky kind of goings this season, some injuries to one of their better players coming back in. But Sophia Stiles has been rolling. Carmen G-Feller has been rolling. Defensively, they're starting to come into their own. I think the Lady Grizz are a pretty dangerous team come conference tournament time, just because they've I don't want to say peaked, but they've started to figure out some of those issues. Whereas like the men conversely have not. The Lady Grizz, they've had similar problems, similar injury woes, similar close game, inconsistent problems. They've started to figure it out. They started off hot, then they hit a slump, and now they're starting to get back into it. And I think this group is kind of poised to do some damage in Boise. I personally think Idaho State is going to run away with the title, but that NAU game, I think NAU might lose that game, and Montana should be able to push Idaho State in that, assuming Idaho State and then meet in semis.
Aaron, it seems like you have something to say. What's on your mind, sir?
Yeah, I don't think Idaho State wins it. I think, honestly, when you look at the men, I think it's pretty cut and dry. When you ask the question who's going to win on the men's side, I think there's a couple teams you narrow it down to. Honestly, on the women's side, anybody in the top 8 can win this tournament. I think anybody that's 8 and above, and even Eastern Washington sitting at 9, has a small chance. But I don't know that Idaho State wins it. Honestly, I think Montana State. I am a huge Darian White fan. She is probably. I came into the season and I voted my preseason MVP on the media side. I gave my vote to Kyrika Rashid from Northern Arizona. I think she's a solid basketball player. She's probably one of the best in the conference. But when I've already got my vote. When I vote for the season MVP, Darian White is by far the best basketball player in the conference. I mean, she scored 32 against Northern Colorado on Friday in a loss, and she probably could have scored 45 or 50, but down the stretch, she was passing the ball a lot more. I don't think Idaho State has it in them to be able to. I mean, they're going to have they're going to have a big game in their second round. They're going to have a tough game in their third round, and then they'll have a tough game in the semis. I think they're going to. I don't think they win it. Honestly, I think that they're going to have to get up 3 games in a row, and that's going to be tough for them to do.
Yeah. Idaho State either is going to face Northern Colorado or Eastern Washington. However, Aaron, I can't see Eastern Washington beating a Northern Colorado team.
I don't either. And really, as I look at the bracket and you look at the top half, and as a Northern Colorado person, you go, man, I hate that they ended up in the top half of the bracket versus the bottom half of the bracket. But everybody that stands between Northern Colorado and the championship game, they have split the season with. They split the season with Idaho State. They split the season with Northern Arizona. They split the season with Montana. And when it comes down to it, if they get there against Montana State, they split the season against Montana State. That's why I'm saying I think any team in the top 8 can win this championship.
Okay. Colby, what's going on with your Weber ladies?
So the problem with the Wildcats this season, I mean, they were picked in the preseason once again to be the last place team, and Portland State has just been awful. They don't have a single conference win, and so, I mean, it's not that nobody saw that coming, but they've been bad. The problem with the Wildcats, though, who are now sitting at the 10 seed facing Sac State, which, by the way, this is a perfect matchup for the Wildcats. It is the only team that the Wildcats swept this year. They split or lost to everybody else except for Sac State, and I don't know why, but they just seem to match up well against them. It's because Weaver likes to play an outside game. They don't shoot a lot of threes, and that just seems to be a tough thing for Sac State to deal with. The problem is that the Wildcats have a very difficult time finishing games, right? There have been a lot of games this season where they've been close. They've lost a ton of them by single digits, many of them by 5 points or less, and that's simply because, I think there is some veteran leadership on this team, right? And so, like, you have seniors like Aloma Solivi and Corey Pencer who are, moving on and graduating. But and then the sort of core of what I would consider this team, which is Darren Hickok, Jaden Matthews, and Emma Torbert, right? They're all juniors this year. They will all be seniors next season. The problem is that the rest of the team is very, very young. And so when you bring the bench in to give those players rest, you've got some problems, right? And so, they're still working through some stuff, and the hope is that next season they will take what they've learned this season on losing all of those close games, turning that around and saying, okay, we're actually going to win some of these games now. That is the hope. But I think that for this matchup, it's a good chance for the Wildcats to get a conference win. I think that if the Wildcats can win a game in the conference tournament, that's a great thing to ride out into next season, right? Because we will see Aloma Solivi and Corey Pencer moving on, and so that means we will see a new backcourt in Ogden, which is a thing I think that needs to happen, right? Like, Aloma Solivi has had a lot of injury problems. She is not a scoring point guard. She's a pretty steady hand, even though the Wildcats have huge turnover issues to this day, right? It's been a problem that has plagued them for a number of years. They cut down on it a little bit this year, but it hasn't been as much. But still, it's enough to look at it and go, "Ugh, that's got to get better." The problem is that Aloma doesn't score, and so people know that they can crowd Emma Torbert or Jaden Matthews or Darren Hickok. Even though Darren has been pretty prolific in scoring, they know that the front court is going to do the bulk of it. And Corey Pencer has been very, very streaky in the game against the Grizz in Ogden. I went to that game. Corey Pencer was shooting the lights out in that game, and the Wildcats win, right? But she's had a lot of games where she, played a lot of minutes. I think she's played the second most minutes in the conference right now, but those minutes have not been terribly effective. And that's where the Wildcats need to take the next step. Is they need to get a scoring backcourt, or at least a backcourt that contributes and keeps the defense honest, because if they can spread the floor a little bit, the way that they like to play inside out will only benefit them if they can get some space. But as it sits right now, this is the best matchup that they could have asked for in the first round.
When it comes to Weber State, you mentioned Colby, and one thing that jumps out to me, when you look at scoring on the women's side, most teams will have 2 or 3, maybe 4 players that score in double digits, and then your second tier, you kind of want in that 5 to 6 point range. But when Weber State brings that second level of players in. You're right. They struggle with scoring. They just don't have anybody that can come off the bench that you're like, ooh, she's a scoring threat. I got to watch her. And I think that's hurt Weber State. And honestly, I think that's probably why Weber State got voted so low. I'm excited to see that they didn't finish as low as they were voted. I like playing Weber State. I think they bring good energy when they come to Northern Colorado.
Yeah, the last game against Northern Colorado in the bank, like
Yep.
well, the Wildcats should have won that game. I mean, no dig, Aaron. I mean, you were there. They had it on free throws, right? And they missed clutch free throws that went to overtime and they lost.
Yep. And I'm going to go back to something Lance pointed out earlier about the men's side. The officiating on the women's side this year was horrid. There was a game against, I think it was Idaho State. And the Bears had like 14 fouls called against them at halftime. Idaho State had 1. I mean, no matter how good a team is, you shouldn't have that kind of foul discrepancy. The officials were bad this year. And I agree that Weber State game really came down to free throw shooting for the Wildcats.
Definitely. Well, gentlemen, it's been great. Before I let you go, is there anything, do we want to make a prediction? Who wins the women's?
I would love to say that Northern Colorado runs the gamut from the 8 and wins the women's, but I don't think they will. I think that the Montana State Bobcats are going to pull out the W in the women's side. They're too good. They're deep. They play good defense. They shoot the ball well, and they have Darian White. I don't think there's anybody in the league that's better than Darian White, and I think the Montana State Bobcats win the women's side.
So they're going to win 2 years in a row.
Yeah. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I mean, on the basketball side, I hate cheering for the Bobcats, and I will never cheer for the Bobcats, but I don't think there's a team on the lower part of the bracket that's even going to give them a challenge. Even Southern Utah at the number 3 spot on the bottom side, I don't think will challenge Montana State. And I just think that they're too good. And when you have a player like Darian White, I just think you're unbeatable.
Yeah, I will say, Casey, Idaho State, the reigning champions.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Okay.
They did win last year.
I thought it was Montana for some reason. Okay.
My years are all messed up.
All good, but I agree with you, Aaron. I think that, even though Idaho State kind of figured it out and went on this run in the last part of January and into February and took the number 1 seed, I don't necessarily trust them. They end up beating the Wildcats in Ogden on a buzzer beater last second. They win by 1. And then, the second game, they beat them pretty handily. But I feel like Montana State has the edge here. And yes, they lost to the Wildcats early in the season. I think that game was in Ogden because the men beat the Bobcats in the brick. But I look at Montana State and I'm just like, yeah, they've got it. They're well coached. They have Darian White. They're a team that shares the ball well. They play great defense. And those are all recipes for, a deep run. And then, like you said, the way that the bracket is set up, I could definitely see Montana State beating Southern Utah in the semis. We assume that SUU will beat the winner of Idaho and Portland State. Idaho's a weird team. They can beat anybody, but they can lose to anybody, right? They've shown this weird up and down. And so I don't know what to expect from them, but I would assume that SUU can probably beat them because I think we can all agree that Portland State will lose in the first round. They've just been so bad. And so then
all right, go ahead. Go. You weren't done.
Last thing is just, I think that, looking through that, I think Montana State finds their way. And then at that point, it's going to be a lot more of a bloodbath on the top of the bracket. The winner of NAU and Montana. I mean, that could go either way. Idaho State is probably going to have a little bit of a challenge, like Aaron said, against a pretty fundamentally sound Northern Colorado. They play great defense. EWU, I don't think that they beat Northern Colorado. And so, yeah, I think I'm picking Montana State, and definitely going to go with the impact of Darian White as being a key reason why. She plays great defense. She's got very active hands, and she can score.
Aaron, you kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. I kind of come around the idea with the men, I see 5 teams that can win it, right? The top 5, any of those 5, I would not be shocked, right? The women, add 4 teams to that. I really do think if you told me today Sacramento State is going to win the Big Sky Conference tournament title on the women's side, I wouldn't be shocked. They got one of the best players in the league, so it wouldn't shock me. If you told me Idaho, yeah, Beyonce B, they can go on a run and do it. Like, none of those teams in that bracket from top down 1 to 9, they can all do it. It's kind of really, I'm not a gambler, but if you're trying to bet this tournament, God bless you, because this is a really hard tournament to bet.
Yep.
I mean, can we all agree, though, that Leona Tillman, likely the women's conference player of the year?
It's hard between her and White. That's why I think it's one of those two. I don't know who was one of those two.
I think it's Darian White, hands down.
I think it's Darian White.
Yeah. I mean, she's got 80 steals. So, yeah. I mean, defensively, she's almost impossible to play against. And she's right up there in scoring. I mean, she scored 32 points twice this season. I think
she's at 16 per game.
Yeah.
Leona's at 20, so she's a solid 4 points ahead. She's been doing it all for Sac State, but the thing is, it's do you give it to the person whose team isn't in the top 5? Sac State's good, but they're not. They're 14 and 15. They're under 500. Montana State's a top 3 team. So how do you value that award?
Right, because we talked a little bit about that on the men's side with Dalen Kuntz likely winning Conference Player of the Year because he has the scoring title, and so long as Northern Colorado found their way into one of these top spots in the conference, that he likely would win that award, right? Because we talked about that at the end of January, about like if the Wildcats can hold on, like if the Wildcats had won the league, Kobe McEwen probably would be the front runner in that award. But the Wildcats have fallen off; they've fallen all the way to the 4 seed. McEwen's numbers have not been great in February, so I look at Leona Tillman's numbers, and it's like she is everything to them. In a way that, Darian White does a lot of good things for Montana State, but they are a more fundamentally sound team at the number 2 seed, and I'm like, who has the greater impact for their team? I give the edge to Leona Tillman, but certainly Darian White, great defense, can score the ball. She has an argument.
So would you say Kyrie Rashid would not be an MVP for NAU?
I'd say she's third. I put her at a solid third, but I think you have to take Tillman or White over her.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
How many points has Rashid made this year? Anyone know?
I got it pulled up. Let me find it. She's only averaging 10.8 points per game. She's fallen off. That's 23rd in the league.
Got it.
And an award like this is driven largely by scoring, right? I think we can agree on that, right, guys? That like scoring weighs heavily into who wins this one.
Right.
Most often than not, unless you're somehow averaging 15 boards and like 13 points, 5 blocks, and your team's the best team. So like on the men's side, for example, if Montana State was undefeated, you're kind of forced to give it to them, right? It would probably have to go to Bello. But because they've had some close games and there's no guy who pops, you can't really give it to an MSU player. So then they'll just probably stack the first team with a bunch of MSU guys. That's most often than not how I've seen this play out type of example.
Yeah, because like we talked about mid-season about if the Wildcats had been able to hold on to the 1 seed, and that if Dylan Jones could boost those points per game, because he's sitting about 12 per game, if he could get that up to 14, 15, that he would be a dark horse candidate for that award potentially, right? Because of his rebounding. That hasn't been the case, and so I don't think that that's really a conversation to be had now.
Shoot, if that happened, he'd be in the running for Defensive Player of the Year, because once upon a time, Aaron, you obviously could talk about this, when Jonah Radabaugh won Defensive Player of the Year back-to-back years, that was mostly because he just wasn't quite good offensively. He was a great defensive player, but I felt it was just basically you were second for MVP, have Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yep. And while he played with Jordan Davis, he didn't have to be good offensively.
Exactly. He played with the best scoring guard in the league.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember I hated that guy's haircut, but he was good. I had to accept it.
He's killing it in the European League. He's over there killing it.
Yeah, he's good.
Well, gentlemen, I'll tell you what. This is all going to be done by next week, by next weekend, by next Saturday. So why don't we get back on here next Sunday and have a discussion of what happened and see if we were right or if we were way off. Yeah?
I mean, I've been wrong a lot this season, so happy to be wrong some more.
I hear you.
I picked Montana State 4th in my preseason ballot on the men's side, so I will eat crow if I have to.
Yeah, they've been a surprise for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. NAU women could surprise everyone and win it all, and go into the go dancing for the first time in I don't know how long. Have they ever been dancing?
I don't think so. I remember saying this while I was at NAU when I was covering them. I didn't think they had, because I kept saying for the past 4 years NAU is a dark horse and they've never done it. So I've stopped saying that.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, gentlemen, once again, thank you so much for coming on. And everyone that's watching, thank you. I hope you've enjoyed this. It's been a pleasure. And like always, win, lose, or draw, root NAU. Until next time, I'll talk to you later. Have a great one.